The Second Amendment is short, just one sentence. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. Yet these 27 words spark endless debate. The Founding Fathers believed deeply in a well-armed citizenry. It was a core principle, essential for the survival of their new nation, a nation they hoped would be free, free from the kind of oppression they knew from the old world. Citizens needed the means to protect their liberty. The founders understood this from personal sacrifice. They had just fought a long and bitter war. The people, armed and ready, were the ultimate guardians of freedom. The Founding Fathers shared a profound fear. Tyranny was their greatest nightmare. They had lived under what they saw as British tyranny. They saw how unchecked power could corrupt leaders. This was a harsh lesson. They were determined to design a government that would prevent tyranny's return. If a government ever became tyrannical, the people could resist. This ability to resist was the ultimate safeguard for liberty. The mere existence of a well-armed populace acted as a deterrent, a warning to any future leaders. Do not abuse your power. The American Revolution left an indelible mark on the founders. The war for independence was largely fought by citizen soldiers. Ordinary farmers, merchants, and artisans took up arms. They confronted one of the world's most professional armies. The British Redcoats were disciplined and well-equipped. They were a formidable fighting force. Yet against the odds, the American colonists prevailed. This remarkable experience was deeply formative for the new nation's leaders. It demonstrated the incredible power of a motivated populace. A populace united in the fight for its own freedom. This lesson was not soon forgotten. The role of militias during the Revolution was critical. The Minutemen are a legendary example. These citizen soldiers were ready to fight at a minute's notice. They famously engaged the British at Lexington and conquered. These early battles effectively ignited the Revolutionary War. Throughout the conflict, militias were crucial. They provided vital support to the fledgling Continental Army. They often knew the local terrain intimately. They had the support of their local communities. They could harass enemy supply lines and gather intelligence. They were the backbone of the resistance in many areas. This success with citizen soldiers profoundly shaped their views on standing armies. The founders harbored a deep and abiding suspicion of large, permanent military forces. The Second Amendment begins with a crucial phrase, a well-regulated militia. This phrase is key to understanding the entire amendment. But what did well-regulated actually mean to the founders? It did not mean heavily restricted by government regulations, as many people might assume today. The 18th century meaning was quite different. It primarily meant something properly trained. It meant disciplined and organized. It meant capable of functioning effectively. It was about readiness and skill, not about extensive government control over ownership. In the 18th century, the term regulated often implied good working order. It meant something that was functioning as it should. Think of a well-regulated clock. It keeps accurate time because its parts are in order. Similarly, a well-regulated militia was one that was effective. It had to be capable of fulfilling its important duties. This required regular training for its members. It required them to be proficient in the use of their firearms, and knowledgeable in basic military tactics and discipline. Without such regulation, a militia would be little more than a mob. This concept of well-regulated was also tied to the idea of civic duty. Being an active member of a militia was a responsibility. Section 5, the Militia Act of 1792, Duty and Action. Soon after the Bill of Rights was ratified, Congress acted. They passed the Militia Act of 1792. This law provides valuable insight into their thinking. It shows how the founders intended to put the militia concept into practice. The act was a direct and practical follow-up. It flowed from the principles enshrined in the Second Amendment. It clearly defined who was considered part of the militia and what their obligations were. This was not just theory, it was law. It was how they planned to ensure the security of a free state. The Militia Act of 1792 had specific requirements. It mandated that most able-bodied adult males enroll. Typically, this meant men between the ages of 18 and 45. They were required to join their local militia units. Crucially, these citizens had to provide their own arms. Section 6. A nation transformed. The 14th Amendment's reach. The landscape of American rights began to change significantly after the Civil War. The 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. It was a pivotal moment in constitutional history. Its primary purpose was to protect the rights of newly freed slaves. It aimed to ensure they were recognized as full citizens and that their fundamental rights were safeguarded. The amendment contains three crucial clauses: the Citizenship Clause, the Due Process Clause, and the Equal Protection Clause. These clauses would eventually have far-reaching implications that extended well beyond their original focus and touched many aspects of American life. One of the most important long-term effects was the concept of incorporation. Originally, the Bill of Rights, including the Second Amendment, applied only to the federal government. It did not restrict the actions of state governments. The 14th Amendment, particularly its Due Process Clause, changed this. Over many decades, through a series of Supreme Court cases, this began to shift. Section 7. Modern Battlegrounds, the Supreme Court, and Individual Rights. In the latter half of the 20th century, a significant shift occurred. The prevailing interpretation of the Second Amendment began to change. A growing number of legal scholars, historians, and activists started to argue for an individual rights view. They contended that the amendment protected an individual's right, a right to own firearms for personal self-defense, and not solely for the purpose of militia service. This perspective gained considerable traction over time. It directly challenged the older collective right consensus. This intellectual and legal movement marked a very significant development. It set the stage for major legal battles. A truly pivotal moment arrived in 2008. The Supreme Court decided the landmark case of District of Columbia versus Heller. This was a watershed decision. For the very first time in its history, the court explicitly affirmed. It ruled that the Second Amendment protects an individual's right, the right to possess firearms for traditionally lawful purposes. This included self-defense within one's own home. Section 8. The unending argument, rights, safety, and society. The debate over the Second Amendment today is intense. It is one of the most highly polarized issues in American society. One side passionately emphasizes the individual right to own firearms. They see it as essential for personal self-defense, and for some, as an ultimate check against potential government tyranny. Adherents to this view generally resist most proposed gun control measures. They often view such laws as infringements upon a fundamental constitutional right. This side of the debate is well organized and very vocal in its advocacy. They believe this right is absolute. On the other side, concerns about public safety are paramount, and the high levels of gun violence in the United States. Proponents of this view advocate for unconstitutional gun laws. They call for measures like universal background checks, for bans on certain types of firearms, often called assault weapons, and for red flag laws or extreme risk protection orders. They argue that such regulations are urgently needed to reduce the tragic toll of gun-related deaths and injuries. The main thing to remember is that gun control is never about the gun. It has always been about control. Section 9. Conclusion: the Founders' Legacy in 2025. The Founding Fathers envisioned a nation where citizens played a role in their own defense. They believed deeply in a well-armed citizenry. They saw it as essential for preserving liberty. Their greatest fear was the rise of tyranny. They relied on well-regulated militias composed of ordinary citizens. The Second Amendment was a direct reflection of these core beliefs. It was a product of its specific historical moment, born from the crucible of revolution and a profound desire for self-governance and freedom from oppression. This vision, for them, was clear and vital. It was about empowering the people. We have seen how this original vision has transformed over time. It is time we stop reading the Constitution for what we can make it say and return to the original meaning and vision of the Founding Fathers. The Constitution does not limit the rights of the citizen, it limits the power of the government. The government never has had any power to regulate the private ownership of firearms. Stay frosty, my friends. Keep your head down and your powder dry.